The first thing we have to recognise that one of the biggest causes of pollution are municipal wastewater systems that are totally inadequate. And it's much easier to sell the idea to a lot of people of investing money over the ground than under the ground. But we need to radically step up our investment in Uisce Éireann in relation to upgrading all municipal wastewater systems that are deficient and providing wastewater systems where we don't have them. An issue that also arises, of course, is that there was a new system put in Clifton. The system in ordinary times is more than adequate for the town. The problem is that the stormwater also goes in where the wastewater goes in. And when you get very, very heavy rains, then the system can't cope and there's an overflow. And the same thing that's happening in Clifton happens in Ringsend here in Dublin. And sooner or later, we're going to have to face up to the fact that we'll have to divert as much stormwater as possible away from the sewage systems or the wastewater systems for sewage water. Minister, there was a report out today, the EPA. Now, it was a bit misleading the way it was in the media because it said that half of the houses failed. But of course, this was done on a risk-based analysis where they tried to target the places they thought there was a problem. So it's not representative of the total number of houses. But wastewater system in private houses can be a problem. But the government penny pinches for the 500,000 houses in the country, we're spending less than $1 million a year. Now figure out what you're spending on wastewater with Uisce Éireann for the other lucky 1.3 million or 1.4 million houses. And you suddenly realise that there's only one group that get no investment. It's the people who have to provide their own. Now, one simple change that could be made is that if you have a defective system on a once-off basis that you'd be eligible to the grant and that you could ask for an inspection, rather than the present one that you could have a terrible wastewater system, but if they don't select you because you're maybe not near an agglomeration, you're not able to get the grant. And that is totally counterintuitive. Another issue is the number of small villages we have that are unsewered. I could mention, for example, Kilronine in the Aran Islands, Kilkieran, Carna, Cardamona, and I go on and on and on. Mention villages, Clonbridge, Craughwell, and so on. The reality is that there's a small amount of money to be given for new systems in towns and villages that are unsewered. We need to multiply that money immediately by at least 10-fold to make any impression across the whole country on all these unsewered towns and villages. And all of this is just practical actions rather than writing more and more reports when we're dealing with the obvious. Another issue I'd like to mention in the very, very short time I have doesn't relate to cleaning water. It relates to an issue of access to clean water. And 10% of the houses in the state are dependent on private systems of various quality, wells and streams and so on. I cannot understand why the Department of Housing Planning and Local Government again and again refuse to accept the premise that the same approach should be taken towards this as was taken to broadband. And the approach taken to broadband was that broadband was a fundamental necessity, as is electricity, as is a road to your house. It's a fundamental electricity to modern living. And I believe the state should develop a policy that would say that every house in the country is going to be given the option of connecting to a public supply of water unless they're already connected to a satisfactory, quality-approved group water scheme. When that kind of job is done, it's done. And Uisce Éireann have made it very, very clear at the Irish Language Committee that if the investment was made, they would maintain those systems, which would need very little maintenance because they'd be brand new, and they'd connect into the existing Uisce Éireann pipe. Finally, in my time here, we need to tackle farm waste. There's a whole lot of reasons for it, and it's a slow one to tackle, because even if you reduce the cause, it doesn't for a while reduce the pollution. But we do have a problem in the south and southeast. But one obvious one is to start processing our slurry and producing biogas, which would give you a biofuel and would replace and displace fossil fuels. But it also gives you a byproduct in pellet form that, if you spread it on land, does a lot less damage than spreading raw slurry. And therefore, Minister, let's stop talking the theory. I've given about 6 practical things that could be done. If they were all done, we'd suddenly find our rivers and lakes were a lot better than they are. And thankfully, I live in one of the best areas in the country for beautiful, clean lakes up in the north of Lough Corrib.